everyone. Welcome to Opera Vision's Q&A session on Birmingham Opera Company's Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk. And we're joined by director Graham Vick, conductor Alpesh Chauhan, and we're also joined by Chrystal E. Williams, who sang the role of Katerina. I'm very excited to have you three with us. And also just as excited to have audience members joining us tonight for the very first meetup between audience and featured artists. So this is a first for all of us. And we will spend 45 minutes discussing this wonderful award-winning production. I suggest that I introduce the Birmingham Opera Company a tiny little bit before we edge into the questions, because it's not just your run-of-the-mill regular opera company. Birmingham Opera Company prides itself on changing the face of opera, and I'm not blaming them for it. Graham Vick, present here, has founded the Birmingham Opera Company under another name, which you might tell us about, back in the late 1980s. And has been making, with various contributors, groundbreaking production. And what's so specific about the Birmingham Opera Company is that it has no venue, and that its annual productions take place in absolutely crazy venues, airport hangars, what was it, power plants, and in our case here for Lady Macbeth, in a disused nightclub. Some of you present here might have been able to see the production. I'll be looking forward to hearing your experience of it. And I also envy you very much. But I would very much like to hear from Graham and his collaborators first, because there are some specifics. Each Birmingham Opera Company production is unique. There are some, would you call it, like a red thread that runs through them, such as the public moves with the action and experiences the opera viscerally and can recognize itself in it. So I would like to ask you, Graham, to tell us a little bit about this promenade production. I don't want to call it a model, but this production that you keep coming back to, and what does it offer that a more regular theater production on stage doesn't? Why do you keep coming back to it, and what does it bring to Birmingham Opera Company's productions?
It offers the maximum engagement. I think that's the first thing. So basically having everybody in one room on one floor means that there is no division between performer and audience, which means that the audience is by definition a part of the performance. Now, this is always true anyway. And anybody who's been to a performance knows that sometimes you have a good, warm, responsive audience. Sometimes you have a cold one. Sometimes you have an audience that laughs a lot. An audience takes on a personality, and that contributes and affects the performance. That always happens. Here, this is that to the nth degree, is the purpose of this, that the audience is in the middle of the opera, in the way as though they were in the middle of a film. And that they're in the middle not only of the physical and dramatic action, but they're in the middle of the music. And this is an ongoing development experiment, but that obviously was started by many composers in the late 20th century, most famous among them Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, of sound all around, of immersive sound, amberio, sound in all directions, and musical action. So it's taking the idea that the music is three-dimensional and theatre by putting the audience in the middle of it. I mean, we now do this at home with quadraphonic stereo. We're well used to being in the middle of the orchestra. We're well used to having a string quartet play if we want, at the four corners of our living room, not in front of us. These things, I think, are developments, are fascinating, are helpful, are insightful, and beautiful. At the same time, it grew out of a series of productions I had done on stages in which I deliberately created multiple worlds and events so that the audience at any given moment, instead of me dictating, this is where you should look and this is what you should feel, gave a series of alternatives of what they could look at. And depending on what they look at, what they hear changes. The dramatic context and how we work and play with that is the job and the life of a director. We're very used in the cinema to having our focus chosen for us. So I was trying to do the exact opposite. And so the audience is completely alive, because if they don't actively choose what to watch, they don't know where to look. And they can look wherever they want, but not choosing is an action. So we have a particular kind of atmosphere of physically engaged audience making choices from the beginning, and therefore investing physically in where they follow, who they respond to, what the sound world is. That's the principle of the promenade.
That's fascinating, and I have so many entry points, but perhaps I'd like to ask a follow-up question to Alpesh.
Can I just say one more thing about that?
Certainly.
Having grown up in the hierarchical world of the opera house, in which there are the star singers, the lesser singers, then the distinguished artists of the chorus, then the poor ballet dancers, and then the much maligned extras who are worth nothing, and then the professors of the orchestra, who are, of course, the most powerful people in an opera house, and then the audience, the other side of a big dark barrier, belonging in another world. So there's one world backstage, frequently dilapidated, undernourished, almost dirty, certainly with unworking toilets, and front of house, gold, cream, gilt, some champagne bars. I wanted to break that duality. And so everybody, in a democratic, contemporary way, you're on the same level as the leading soprano. You're on the same level, really, emotionally, in terms of your rights, as everybody within the piece. And certainly the way we create our pieces in Birmingham, there is no priority. All the actors, the chorus, the orchestra, the singers, everybody works and exists as a group on one single democratic level.
Just ask a question.
Well, thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, I think that's absolutely fascinating what you've just said. I just want to know practically, the public, do you actually train them beforehand, or do you kind of orchestrate them on the night?
On the night, it's done on we have a dress rehearsal with an audience, but that's not to train the public, that's to train us to figure out how to be reactive. But they always take you by surprise. There's always one night when maybe they just don't move, actually, and things, as I say.
That's so exciting. That is just so exciting. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Well, we obviously have the very democratic and not on a pedestal lead singer with us today, Chrystal E. So I'd be happy to hear about your process and your experience interacting with volunteer participants, actors and chorus as well. And I also had a question up my sleeve to Alpesh, because all of this obviously poses so many questions for the orchestra. When the audience is moving along, you don't have a place where everyone hears the same thing. And as you will see, when you watch the production on Opera Vision this Friday, which I'll urge you very much to do, there's quite a unique configuration in which the orchestra is facing away from the main acting and promenading area towards you, who can be seen on multiple screens. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more, both about the reasoning behind this and how that might affect the audience's experience?
Similar to in an opera house, it's all based on trust, of course. I have to trust those things completely. I have to trust Graham and the assistants' feedback on how things sound in different parts of the hall, and get used to that feeling. So if I know that at a particular point, a singer is really miles away from me and it has to sound this much behind or this much ahead, you sort of get used to this kind of thing. But also they just, I mean, you can ask Chrystal afterwards, she may disagree, but I think we just have to trust each other completely. They have to trust what I have there, keeping the orchestra together. I have to trust that they're going to go with the cameras, and we find a way to then make this work. Further to Graham's point before as well, it just may be interesting that I've come through the system in Birmingham, and I owe the inspiration that I have had to become a musician, to take it further to the city and what the city offered. And actually, as a youngster, I could see Birmingham Opera Company. And when I was assistant at CBSO, I did go to performances. So I was one of these people who was being sort of ushered around, and being totally inspired by this. And as Graham said as well, the criticism we get the most about it being stuffy and the elitist hierarchy that sometimes exists a lot of the time exists in our world. For someone like me with a background of parents who know nothing about classical music at all, know a lot about Bollywood, the interactivity of Birmingham Opera, the hands-on approach, the way that an audience member can bring in, I could bring so many of my relatives, my parents, my aunts and uncles to these events, and they would go away afterwards loving opera. And they wouldn't even know that it was opera. It just felt so close to home, so close to that, the craziness of Bollywood and the dance numbers that they have and the dialogue moving through as well. It's actually not so far away. And what Graham has done and what Richard has done with Birmingham Opera Company is allowed opera. And it's really important that it's allowed opera to touch people, because it's not often, the people can be blamed as well for not understanding it, not getting it. But what the Birmingham Opera Company does, and you'll see in the Shostakovich that we did, it brings it right in front of their faces and they absolutely love it. So my job, going back to it again, is just so exciting because the action is going on everywhere where the audience are really feeling part of it. It's like looking through a window of every room, of every situation in the opera. And really feeling hands-on with what's going on.
We do rehearse a lot.
Yes.
I should just say, I mean, we put a lot of time into this. You could not, one of the reasons this work doesn't happen in opera houses is they don't spend this much time rehearsing.
I can imagine. So, Alpesh, obviously this collaboration has then borne its fruits because you have since become music director at Birmingham Opera Company. And there will be many more collaborations, I hope. Chrystal, would you like to talk a bit about this? You're joining us from the US now, but you have quite a bit of history with the Opera Company. Your first production, I believe, was The Icebreak, Michael Tippett's The Icebreak as Hannah, which was streamed incidentally on Operavision. And I wonder what you take out of your experience, especially, as a lead singer singing alongside volunteer chorus and in this very democratic, non-hierarchical setup.
I honestly love it. So I told this story in the other interview as well, but it's really kind of sums up my experience with Birmingham Opera Company. So the first time I went there for rehearsal, we were in this, warehouse, and it was like raining or snowing inside, and you were speaking, you could see the smoke coming out of your mouth. And they were like, okay, let's take off our coats and go move around. And I was like, what? And there were all these people, and just, it immediately took the pressure off of performing, because in at least in the States, when you show up to rehearsal, the first day is like this big sing through and kind of, everybody stands up and then they're off book and you dress up and it's like this kind of show and tell. And what I love about Birmingham Opera Company is that from day one, it was always about the creation of art. And so what Graham and Birmingham Opera Company has done is beautifully taken the importance off of individuals and instead brought the collective into focus. Because, something else that I love about opera is that when I went to college, I had to, before you could be a lead performer, you had to work backstage. So I was a rail girl. So I grew up, in the operatic world, seeing behind the scenes. So I literally know, the show cannot open until I open the curtain. So every part is integral. So I have had this kind of thought process. And so going to Birmingham Opera Company and experiencing this in person was amazing because, like I said, it just, all this nervousness and excitement and it just channels it into focused, creative energy. And so I love it. I honestly love it, because I could be next to a chorister. I could be next to some award-winning whoever, and we're just all in it together. We're just running around all in this disused whatever space we're in and, creating this amazing art. We're all struggling. We're all thriving together. And I love that because that is what opera does. It brings all of the fields together. And I go further even and say it brings all of the people together. And that is literally what the Birmingham Opera Company does. Yeah.
It certainly does. It is a communal experience that is being recompensed as well. This Monday in the International Opera Awards, you've come home with Best Education and Outreach, which is in a sense ironic because I'm led to believe that you don't actually have a separate education department. But it is also very, very well deserved because your work with the local community is at the very heart of the artistic concept of...
Well, here maybe I could come in and say, we don't have an outreach and education department because I don't believe in outreach and education work. The work that we do reaches out and educates it. What else is opera meant to be? What else is art for? It's the art that should reach out. If we need to be educating people to understand what we're doing, we're not doing it right. We're not finding the way to speak, to communicate. If I can't get my point across to you, it's not because you now have to go, it's classically British, of course, because you now have to go and study English because all I can do is speak English. Should I speak louder and clearer and then you'll understand? That is basically what opera is. Opera continues to do more and more of itself, and it's everybody else's job to find a way of coming near it. Instead, what we try to do in Birmingham is find the joins, is unpick, open out, unpack the works to see where all the points of contact are between everybody who might come and see and might come and hear it, who discover, all of our volunteers and through them the audience, who discover their own lives and experience turn out to be already there in these great works, that they don't need to learn anything, they already carry everything.
It's beautiful. I know for a fact that we actually have a volunteer participant here. I don't know if you'd like to say a little bit. I will not point you nor name you, so you may stay anonymous if you don't want to say anything at this point, Marcia.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, where do I start? Yes, I am, or have been. No, I am a volunteer. I've been for some time. And obviously I want to pat myself on the back because yes, I got the gold. I was one of those who was there, Lady Macbeth. What can I say? Every single time, every single performance that we've done, different productions, you just have to empty whatever preconceptions you had in your mind before you enter whatever disused space and just go with it. Whatever that is. And I've been there for some time, so people know the things that I hate. Like, I'm not too keen on acting. But as part of the opera company, that's one of the things that you do. But, you know, I've developed ways of just getting around that. What I will say about, of course, I'm going to talk about the volunteers because that's who I'm a part of, is that we welcome anybody and everybody. And yes, I'm part of the chorus. So we've even had people in the chorus who cannot sing a note. And it's all inclusive and it doesn't matter. You bring whatever skill set that you've got, and somehow Birmingham Opera Company will find it, use it and exploit it to the max. Some of the things they have got me to do in the name of art, I can't I can't say in public, but you know, you've believed in the vision and you've done it, and you're glad you've gone through the process. And I have actually found my voice through the Birmingham Opera Company, because believe it or not, I'm not actually an extrovert. I'm not at all. But I can put on this mask and I can perform should I wish to. And that's it, really. So, yeah. So if you feel inspired after you've seen the film on Friday, Opera Vision, get in touch. And that's it.
Thank you, Marcia.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And one way in which the chorus can easily sing along is also your decision to stage Lady Macbeth in English. You were using, I believe, David Pountney's translation, but somewhat sharpened and revised in the rehearsal process. All the better to you. The faint-hearted should possibly abstain on Friday night. Can you, either of you, explain to me? I mean, I might have my ideas. It's language and opera is a topic close to my heart. Why you choose to stage your operas in the local language?
Personally, I believe it would have been the wish of every composer. That, I suppose, is the bottom line, really. Where does the music come from? What is the beginning? It's the word. The composer sees the word, works often incredibly hard with the librettist, chooses the story, creates the dramatic theme, the word, and out of those words, he composes, or she composes, the music. Begins this incredible inward journey, these sounds, all of that. If you deny the audience the words, if you deny them that meaning, what are you doing? You're prioritizing, you're telling everybody, which is, I think, a mistake, that the music is the only important thing, that the music is rules. The music doesn't rule. The music through the drama rules. The music doesn't have a sense without its theatrical context. So yes, you can listen at home to La Bohème and it's gorgeous. Or you can sit on the edge of your seat in a theater and have your heart torn out by its incisive cruelty. But in order to do that, you need to respect the fact that Puccini composed a modern opera with a highly sophisticated, detailed libretto, and not a series of romantic tunes with a lot of chatter. The meaning, so when the one thing I would say, rather than audience standing up, that holds together everything we do in Birmingham, because it's where my choice of the repertoire has, and now my choice with Alpesh as we do it together, we start with meaning. We choose a piece that will mean something to us and to our company and to our audience. And we're content-based. So there are some pieces that won't arrive at us. So how can we, having decided to do that and share that with an audience, suddenly then say, by the way, it's in a foreign language, you'll have to read the translation. And my final point on this is that, of course, reading words completely violates what you're hearing. It distracts you and it splits you. And when you read a phrase, it's completely different, and it has a different emotional meaning to when you hear it delivered. So I am 100% in favor of translating opera.
Mm-hmm. Just a very short follow-up question to Chrystal E while you get ready to ask yours, dear participants. How do you as a performer, do you feel any difference when you sing an opera in a language that the audience can understand than when I'm certain that you are also singing repertoire in languages that are not immediately accessible to the public watching you? Do you feel a difference in the energy and the electricity in the room?
For me, there's always, yes. In short, yes. There's always a difference when there's comprehension, immediate comprehension, and when there's kind of secondary comprehension. So in staging or, in a production, when you're performing an opera in the language of the people, say, for instance, there's a joke or something that's really dramatic. When the action happens, there's an immediacy. So if the laughter or the comprehension comes later, that moment has already passed. So then people are living in the past instead of in the present. And so there's definitely a difference when the people understand and when they're reading or working to understand. Also, I believe, though, that when you see something on stage, when you see it in motion, if something is funny, you can see it's funny. But there's some turns of phrases that you wouldn't understand necessarily unless you had a translation or unless you understood the language that is being sung. So there's a bit of both. I mean, the beauty of music is that you will feel something if the person is giving you something to feel. That's what I truly believe that. Acting 101, if you are communicating something, then the people are receiving something. That's just how we are as a human being. You could just be sitting here doing signs and I would feel something if you were communicating something. But then there's that immediacy and comprehension that is key to storytelling. So there's a bit of both for me.
And also, I mean, we have to also think about our audience as well. We're a special company. The audiences that we have, primarily, many of them have never seen anything like this before in a theatre even. They've not seen an opera. We're getting people in to experience these forms of art and touching them, as Chrystal says, with this immediacy. If we did these things in their original languages, we would have the same audience that the theatres have as well. I mean, this is all about the public and people like Marsha as well, and actually just involving everyone, getting everyone, the chorus, they understand everything that they're singing as well. They understand everything they're doing. And when Marsha said as well about some members of the chorus who can't even sing, who can't sing a note, it's all about strength of feeling and the meaning that is there to convey. And that's what Graham is so inspiring to all of them about. In what does this mean? How do we deliver it? Is this shouted at this point? Is this beautiful? Is it how do we convey the emotions that are there? And the language is a further tool in that, surely.
Okay.
And I would just point out also that in regards to Birmingham, what I believe from my working with them is that Birmingham always seeks to break down any kind of barrier or any kind of layer of separation. And so by translating, there's also that immediacy because there's no longer a language barrier, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't understand, or I don't know, always there's a language barrier in opera. And so what Birmingham does is they just take that away and say, okay, well, now there's not. So, yeah.
I think there's also one other point, that when it's your own language, you listen better. You strain to listen, of course, because it's singing. You can't sit back, it's not all done for. You have to work. But in working, you lean forwards. It's like the joy of going to a play is you don't know what they're going to say next. So that actuality of listening as a positive act also makes you more active and more open and porous to receive the music.
Can I just say something about that? Because I feel quite strongly about the translation thing. And it's the first time I've really thought about it in the sense of getting the words to fit into the music. Because when I think about it, every time we see a foreign play, we have it translated into English or French or Italian, depending on where you are. And I would never expect to see it in the original language. So to say that you can actually fit the words into the music, that changed everything for me.
Of course, you see a foreign play in a translation if it's done by the Royal Shakespeare Company or the National Theatre. The National Theatre doesn't do Goldoni in Italian or doesn't do Faust in German. It does it in English. Its touring companies do it in the foreign language.
Yes, but I do think of opera as essentially music. So it never occurred to me. But no, this is what I'm not saying I'm converted. I'm actually considering what you're saying because it's a very exciting thing for me, actually. I think language is extremely important of the music, but the way you present it is as though the words are actually an interpretation. So you have to interpret it from Russian into English in this case. And that does help. That would help with the actual feeding of the music, because then I would be able to follow it in the music rather than seeing the subtitles, which is what people usually do.
That is completely right. And very often the actual shape of the music is about the precise meaning.
Yes.
If you don't know the precise meaning, you get a funny, jagged phrase, but a neatly written sentence. But if you understand completely what I mean, don't you?
I think it's very exciting. I'm really enthralled by the whole thing. I think it's.
Could I just say about the process when we are working with singers as well, just a little bit of insight. The changes that we make and with the libretto there are not easy. They're really actually quite difficult because Graham is thinking and we're thinking together about the line, where the accents fall with the words. So it's really not an easy process to change anything. It's something that even Chrystal will say as well. We try it with the singers. And we can try it for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, we decide it's not working. And we have to go back to the drawing board, go back to the Russian, and then go back to how to fit it also for the English to work. So it sounds much simpler in this conversation than I promise you it is. It takes a lot of work. Yeah.
And I would even add that as a singer from the States, there's an extra level for me because you take the Russian and you translate, you go through this translation and this process, but then, it's also the language of the people. So there's, the language of the people in the UK, in Birmingham. And so for me, something that might sound or suit my ears is not necessarily what would suit the people of Birmingham. So for me, there's always that extra level of, okay, but this is not my voice. This is the people of Birmingham. This is the voice of Birmingham, So sometimes for me, it still seems a little weird, but by the end, I get it.
I would like to ask Aya Makarova, who had a question to ask. We have a couple of questions from the attendants, and then I'll also ask you a couple of questions that we've received via email and YouTube, if that's all right with you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And hello, everybody. It's so great to be here. Native Russian speaker here. I have a question to Graham. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, long time no see. I have a question about the video. It's a bit of a tricky question, but after a year of only seeing opera on the screen and not in person, you start kind of treating things. Well, I start kind of treating things differently, and I know a lot of companies are trying to make a special product which is now video oriented, but now we are facing a situation when an opera that was not only tailored for being experienced in person, but which has it as a key feature. I mean, it's based on the live experience that you have to live through, and it's shot for video, and the audiences, a lot of people, well, me included, will see it for the first time as a video production. How do you think it works? I mean, what do you think about it? What do you make of it?
Well, the first thing I'd say, you'll see that it's called a live film. And it's not a film. It's very, very obviously a very rough, actual filmed live event. So the audience is in the film, of course they are, because the singers are in the middle of the audience. The audience, you can't lose the audience. There's nothing remotely cinematic about it. And I think that's a positive. I'm obviously very keen that this kind of work and what we do, because I talk about it a lot, I try and take it to other places. I'm keen that people should see other ways of presenting opera, really. That's, I mean, finally, because of the discussion on digital, we are cracking the conversation after nearly 50 years has finally turned away for whether it's in modern dress or not, or whether there's a tank in it, or whether it's no. Finally, we have other terms to talk about how we perform opera, and the idea of moving it forward and opening out. This is one way to go. So it's a film of an experiment. This is not dictated by it's the opposite of dictated by the digital world, indeed. But I'm very grateful to the digital opportunity to be able to communicate and share with people a bold experiment. You know, not everybody can come to Birmingham, can they? We do 5 performances, 6 performances. It's a real chance for people to show into that. And I think also the very radical thing about is that if you add up the fact that this begins as a Russian story from a Leskov novel, then you add Shostakovich, which completely transforms the artistic level, content, and color of the original, but remains in its own way. Then you go to Birmingham. Well, in Birmingham, we're not going to do a story about 19th century provincial Russia because it's too far away from us. And if we were, I'd probably do Katya Kabanova because it's simpler and clearer. But instead, we take, which is why we chose this piece, the Shostakovich who played the piano for silent films, the Shostakovich who played for cabaret, who wrote operetta, who was lived through the most exciting moment of the 20th century anywhere in the 20s. We take that man, extraordinary, fresh, irreverent, and we take him and we find he sits in Birmingham, we all get it. That, I think, is something that it's really worth adding a camera to. But we gave a man a camera and said, wander around and film this. It's quite anarchically filmed, you'll see. We've tried to make that a part of the experience.
If I may have a tiny follow-up question, when you said that the story changes with each layer from Leskov to Shostakovich and then further and further, then about your interpretation, which I haven't yet seen and I'm very, very impatient to see, but what I have seen is the list of characters, and in the original libretto and in the, Shostakovich's opera, the characters have personal names, and in your list of characters, there are only social functions, and why is that?
Well, it's largely, again, to help the audience. But, you know, when as a teenager, I started reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and everything, fortunately, my English translation of Tolstoy had a list of characters at the beginning with the names, the patronymic and everything. And as I read, I had to keep going back to the beginning to remember and figure out who each character was. Well, that's not very helpful to an audience, is it? And at the end of the day, whether she's called Katerina Ishmailovna or not doesn't change very much the plot. What you need to know is who she is. So I did it to avoid complicating things, just to simplify it. I mean, obviously from the show itself, although I use those as labels, there's nothing stereotypical about the characterization.
True.
Thank you very much.
Annika, you would like to ask a question, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. I'm a Brummie born and bred, and I don't know much about opera. I've barely been to any opera in my life, but about a decade ago, I was lucky enough, because of a friend of mine, Helga, to get tickets to Life as a Dream at an abandoned warehouse in Digbeth. And I also went to the performance at the Tower Ballroom with Chrystal a couple of years ago, and it was extraordinary. It was like being on drugs, even though I've never done drugs in my life. And it really stayed with me. And what I'm really interested to learn is, you've created the Birmingham Opera Company over the last few decades. Where do you see the Opera Company going in the next decade?
Oh, that big question. Well, further. We see it going further, certainly. I mean, Alpesh and I are going to be moving into new initiatives, obviously, together. He's just starting now, and that's incredibly exciting for me, and a great shot in the arm and a big support. Like everybody else, we've had a slight hiccup at the moment when we were about to move forward, pushing excitedly, so we're getting ourselves together again. At the moment, in fact, we're preparing Das Rheingold, the Rheingold Wagner, together, which we'll be doing this summer. I mean, I think we hope it will go further and win bigger, more audiences, and we'll do good work. Alpesh, what do you see?
It's exactly that, just doing more of the same. I mean, we don't just stop with one story. We do, of course, there's so many smaller events that the company does throughout the year, but these bigger projects sort of every year and a half or so. There are so many different stories to tell, so many different stories that will mean something to the people of Birmingham and to different people. As I said before, we're getting in so many different people, different backgrounds coming in, people like yourself for the first time who'd not come to an opera before, like my own family. I think this is what we must just keep doing, just keep getting in these people, keep doing art, keep delivering art at this highest possible level with the fantastic orchestra, with the absolute world-class singers that we always have, the casts, and keep delivering this to as many people from all walks of life as much as possible.
Wonderful, thank you. CB Merritt, I believe that you would like to comment on the performance.
Yes, thank you. I'm calling in from New Orleans, and I attended the performance mainly at the urging of one of my best friends, Brendan Gannell, who sang along with Joshua Stewart, both of whom we knew very well when they were at Curtis, and we follow them wherever they go. This was not a performance, this was an experience, and I think that very few operas really end up being more than a performance. But the experience from the minute you walked in with what you thought were many other audience members, only to discover that sooner or later they were playing roles in the performance itself, was extraordinary. And I have to say, this was probably one experience in my life that I will treasure and never forget. Chrystal was fabulous, and these are very demanding roles in terms of acting and doing it under the circumstances. Surprisingly, the acoustics in the orchestra was unbelievable, and as a combination, this experience was really something to be treasured forever. And I'm so happy to see that we'll have a chance to get a glimpse at it again on Friday. I'll also comment that I was very happy that Opera Vision gave us access to the Fidelio production that was done a few years ago in December, which also had this amazing combination of audience participation and set the story in a contemporary setting that really made a lot of sense.
Thank you, CB. And we are slowly coming to the end of our Q&A session, and not all of our audience members are able, obviously, to fit into a Zoom room. So we do have people following us on Facebook and YouTube. And I have a question from Lindsay on YouTube that I'd like to ask, and I think it is mostly for Chrystal E. Many operas, she says, especially Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, feature violence, and especially sexual violence against women. How do singers prepare for these scenes? How do you get comfortable performing that?
That's a great question. Well, I think I'll first start saying you never get comfortable. It's not something that's innate in my being. But what I do through the process is realize that this is an art form that brings awareness to various stories, various situations, and various occurrences in actual life. And that is what I kind of hang on to. And actually, I struggled with that in Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, because it was trying to find that kind of relatability, I guess, to the character. For me, that's so far not who I am. And how do you transform that into something that you can portray? For me, I portray it as a character, as a role, as a telling of this story. And so in order to be true to that storytelling, you have to free yourself of what myself, Chrystal E. Williams, what I would put on this role, and instead portray who Katarina, how she would have done it, who she would have been, who she is as a role. And so to answer the question point blank, for me, it's not comfortable. It's never comfortable. It's just not in my being. But you find ways through your process to still share the story. And Graham, we talked about it earlier, trust, you have to trust everyone. Graham is very keen and watching and directing and making sure that we're telling the story and we're not overdoing it. And so I trust Graham that, his vision and the collective vision will be told truthfully and honestly, and not as some sort of, publicity stunt or something like that. There's always truth in it. And so that's what helps to ground me, the truth part of the storytelling.
So it is not gratuitous.
No.
Would you like to add something to that from your perspective as a director, putting your performers in that situation, Graham?
Well, look, this is an issue that's going to run, isn't it? That's exactly right. I try and work very hard to create a kind of safe atmosphere and give as much support I can. But as Chrystal says, we're in the business of doing great works of art, and we don't want to avoid what sometimes are unpleasant truths. Those also have to be encountered. How to do those, I can only back up really what Chrystal said. How to honor those, how to make them uncomfortable. Obviously, I would say not offensive, but that's not true. Sometimes we want to offend. But I think in that case, we have to find a way of doing it where we share being offended, where we share the offense. It has to be conscious. But we can't not offend people. We're doing great and difficult works of art. If you want an audience as broad-ranging as ours, at some point or other, we're going to have uncomfortable moments. And we do our best to open to both to signal and to take care of that. But we need to be brave at the same time.
And you are. Thank you in the name of all of us for continuing to be brave and bringing us these wonderful productions. I had a wonderful time with all of you in a very democratic Zoom room where both conductors and lead singers and lay people like myself are just a little profile picture. I hope you will all tune in on Friday, and that we'll have many more occasions to share like this. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham, Alpesh,
Thank you.
and all of you.